So we are here today with Brandon McInnis, who I got to work with this week on an incredible session for a game. So new character coming out. And I wanted Brandon to speak to us today because what was fascinating about his session was that he was able to connect emotionally to the character with just whatever really was on the page and a little bit of description that he got from the writer. And he was able to hit emotional marks that I didn't even have to ask for. He intuited them and then got there. You know, anger and frustration to anguish, pain, sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to hear from Brandon, what's his technique for getting there like that so seamlessly?
We did battle cries, right? And the battle cries are essentially, it's the same context for the line. You have 15 lines and they're all different, but the context is the same. You said you didn't need to get me to an emotional place, but you actually got me there. You may not have realized it, but you said a few words to me right before we started. It was, "You're charging into battle. You are leading the army." And that gave me a very visceral, distinct context. And when you said those words to me, I actually flashed back to the Siege of Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings. That's what I thought of.
How quickly did it take for you to get there? Was it just like that was the image, or did you stop and think for any moment like, okay, got it?
It was instant. It was instant. But I think that's because I've been doing this for a while. Every once in a while, if there's a very specific situation or scenario I'm put into, I do have to think about it. It's not always instant. But for this one, it was.
I was particularly impressed with a point in it where your character is voicing that he's failed and disgraced the memory of his fathers. You went there with such, grief and frustration. That was just so surprising to me that you had that available to you right at that moment, because the lines right before it were in battle.
That's also because you gave me a lot of context for this character. It's important to read as an actor, right? What we always say, like, we'll read your auditions very carefully. And that's true. And so I remember reading about this character, but also I rely so heavily on my director when I go into a session. I like to say that I have terrible goldfish brain, which is another way to say I'm very good at forgetting things, which can be helpful. It's important as an actor to get out of your own way. I don't want to remember that I'm in a booth when I'm recording a session. I don't want to, I need to be mindful of the mic, right? But hopefully that's on autopilot the more you do it. I just want to focus on what you are giving me in the session, Gillian, or you, Randy. You're giving me this context. He looks up to his father, right?
Yeah.
His father is very important to the world that he is in. How has he had to deal with that for years and years and years and years? And he has this moment, right? These are his moments where he has to bring it to the table, and he's never experienced a scenario that he has. And so I'm thinking about those things very deeply in session, and I think that's what gets me there. I've done a lot of classes, like on-camera classes, and I've done a lot of scene work with other people and a lot of Meisner, which is kind of counterintuitive when it comes to the voiceover booth because we're recording in isolation, right? If you're on a video game, you have all these lines in the Excel spreadsheet. You don't get to go back and forth. And with Meisner, it's all about responding to the other person. So how do you do that in video games, in voiceover? You imagine it, right?
It makes so much sense to me, because when you're there and you're actually having the ability to work on technique and work on it face to face with another actor, I can see how it really enriches your ability to pull from that while you're alone in a booth.
There are many people who are interested in voiceover that want to get into VO and aren't interested in other types of acting, right? But I personally think VO is the most difficult, most artificial form of acting there is, because you're alone. And we as humans don't exist in a vacuum. We have evolved within the context of interacting with other people in real life. And I'm very much of the opinion that if you don't want to do classes or interact with people, you're doing yourself a great disservice as a voiceover actor.
We would love to have you back on an LTVO podcast episode, wouldn't we, Randall?
We would.
I'd love
Drag you in and we're just going to talk to you for a long time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, Gillian and Randall.
Thank you, Brandon. We'll talk to you soon.
Take
All
care.
right. Talk to you soon.